Alderman Bob Bauman.
Here.
Mr. Mark Flaherty.
Here.
Mr. James Cantor.
Here.
Mr. Scott Mansky.
Here.
Mr. Greg Marcus. Ms. Aisha South. And we have a quorum.
Before we start, are we trying to reach Greg by cell?
We have called his cell, called his office, and it is going to listen.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll, if he jumps in, we'll shows up. We'll acknowledge that. Thank you. First is the approval or any discussion on the meeting minutes from October of 2022 already. So is there any discussion on the the meeting minutes? If not, I would seek a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor of approval of the meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All right, next we'll turn over to Steve Marsh for our financial report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Today's update will be our last review of 2022 financial activity until Baker Tilly's presentation of the audited financial statements at the May board meeting. Overall, today's financial news regarding 2022 is positive and not materially different from the update that was provided to the board in December. But before we get into the numbers, a couple of quick updates. Number one, regarding 2023, you'll notice there are no financial exhibits for that fiscal year in your packet today. At this time, we continue to forecast the budget the board adopted in October. We'll provide a more comprehensive forecast on 23 at the March board meeting. Number two, Baker Tilly conducted their preliminary audit field work in December. The district's finance team will be spending the better part of the next 45 days preparing for their primary field work, which is scheduled to occur in March. And it's just noted Baker Tilly will be presenting their audit report to this committee in May. And number three, we'll be asking the board next Friday to adopt a resolution that allows management to formally transfer funds from the capital maintenance account held in trust at U.S. Bank to the district's operating account to fund the 2023 budgeted capital expenditures. The board is asked to and subsequently adopts this resolution each and every year, a pretty routine matter. Okay, so let's get into the 22 review, and we'll start with the income statement first on page 4 of your packet, which compares our annual budget to our annual forecast, and that has column IDs E, F, G, and H at the top. To get right to the point, you can see on line 66, column G, that we exceeded budgeted net income before depreciation and expansion debt by $10.7 million. The largest contributing factor to this positive budget variance is tax revenues, line 34. You can see we exceeded budget in that category by about $8.1 million. Now, before Marty accuses me of sandbagging this budget number, I think it's important to bring context to how it was established, or perhaps more importantly, when it was established, which was late September of 2021. At that time, the district had received tax revenues through July of that year. Those collections were trailing our 21 budget numbers, and assuming the rest of 21 actualized in a similar way, we projected only modest year-over-year growth for the 22 budget. Well, we now know that 21 did not actualize in a similar way. In fact, for the months of August through December of 21, total tax collections by the district exceeded 2019 numbers during that same period. And as you're all well aware, the recovery continued and even accelerated in 22, blowing well past our budget. The numbers in the income statement today for tax revenues are actual through October, with modest estimates in place for November, December, so it is possible that we could see this number go further. However, as is, the 22 numbers are ahead of the 2019 pre-pandemic totals by almost 6%, which is almost 2 years ahead of the schedule that HVS projected when we issued debt in 2020 for the expansion.
Question about that. How much is that related to inflation versus an increase in transactions?
Well, I think it's probably a combination of both, depending on the tax revenue stream you're referring to, Alderman.
Right. Okay.
I think what we see with the hotels is that the average daily rates are up,
right,
although occupancy isn't quite back to those pre-pandemic levels.
Okay.
The food and beverage tax, I think, and inflation is a contributing factor. So what does this mean for the district? Does it mean we're flush with cash? Well, not exactly, but it does mean we can replenish the restricted reserve account more quickly than previously projected for the $7 million we took to help fund the project budget gap. It means we offset some of the expected negative cash flow on the operations side as we paid down this year the 2020 payment deferral to Visit Milwaukee. And it means the district is likely to make its second pilot payment to the city in 2023. Overall, it means the district's fund balances are stronger than we expected them to be at the end of 22, and that should give the board some comfort, particularly as we enter 23, where the macroeconomic outlook remains uncertain. So certainly a good news story for 22, and we hope that continues into 23. A couple other highlights for 22, net operating income, line 28, column G, exceeded budget by about $500K or 36%. Lines 1 through 5 and lines 7 through 9 are the major event revenue categories, and you'll notice some variation in these line items between budget and forecast. We've commented on this throughout the year. Overall, revenue came in as expected, however, not in the buckets that we had originally expected. I do want to point out line 13, other income, which is substantially higher than budget. I mentioned this in prior committee meetings as well. This is where we booked the supplemental grant award awarded to the district via the Shutter Venue Operators Grant Program. That was just under $500,000. Also driving the positive variance in this category is better than expected fees refunded to the district by the State Department of Revenue for its tax collection services, as well as some canceled event revenue from late 21 and early 22. On the operating expense side, you'll notice several categories that exceeded initial budget estimates. The labor market remained tight throughout most of 22. This created budget pressures on both contract services, line 17, and wages, line 15, as the district contracted more third-party labor to backfill positions we normally fill in-house. And we paid out more overtime to cover some open positions that we couldn't fill as quickly as we had hoped. And utilities, line 18, is up 16% as the district has dealt with rising energy costs. Scrolling down to line 35, interest income, you can see that we're projecting to exceed budget there by just under $3 million for 22. If you recall, this income is earned principally off of bond proceeds for the expansion and is a key component of the plan presented to the board in September to fund the project budget gap. I expect this number will continue to grow in 23 based on the current rate environment and the expected cash drawdown schedule for the project. Scrolling down to line 38, Bucks district ticket surcharge kicked off about $200K more than we had budgeted, largely due to better than expected results for Bucks games and the NCAA tournament. As for non-operating expenses, the district was able to hold the line here. You'll notice some chunky positive variances in lines 41 salaries, 43 unemployment comp, 44 health and dental insurance, 47 advertising, and line 50 legal services. Thank you, Kirk. The two outliers here, of course, are the Visit Milwaukee management fee, line 49, and the City of Milwaukee pilot payment, line 63. While both substantially exceeded budget estimates, they are also a reflection of the district's financial success in late 21 and fiscal year 22. One other note on the income statement, line 67, bond interest expenses greater than budget. This is due to the debt transaction the district closed in late September to cover the expansion project shortfall. And on the matter of debt, we've executed at least one bond transaction over the last 3 years, 20, 21, and 22. At this time, I don't expect the district is going to play the debt markets in 23, but should opportunities arise, we'll certainly keep this committee informed. Any questions on the income statement? Yes, Scott.
So one of the things you normally include in the budget is you indicate the number of events that you're going to do during the year and what you planned and where you were before.
Yes.
Do you do a similar schedule to show us what you actually ended up with events for the year
So
in comparison to budget?
Sure. We budgeted, I think, 252 events in 2022. We actualized 239. And part of the variance there of 13 or 14 events were events that had canceled in early 22 that we previously expected to have happen. So if you add those back in, we would have been right at our budget number in 22, but we came in a little bit shorter than expected.
Yeah, can you do a schedule on that?
Yes, absolutely.
Provide that to us,
Yes.
similar, just as a follow-up to that.
Yeah.
So the utility increase, that's mainly due, you saying, to cost increases that you've had for that?
Yes.
Not additional usage?
No, I think usage has been pretty similar year over year. Scott, it's really the rising rates that nipped us there.
Okay. So with the amount of, on line 34, the net tax revenue is like $8 million. what impact did that have on your restricted cash? Because your restricted cash is around 21 million now, but I don't know if that's where you were anticipating to be or not.
It's where we expected to be when we put together the project budget plan to draw the 7 million out to help fund that budget
Okay.
gap. We were at 27 million earlier this year. We took 7 million out to get down to 20, and now the increase in restricted revenues is helping to recover that fund quicker than we expected it. So by end of 20, you'll see this on one of the other schedules later in the presentation, Scott.
Page 10, right?
That's right, page 10. By the end of 23, we would expect that balance to be 23.6 million.
Yeah, because what I was trying to understand is what happened during 22.
The ins and the outs relative to the budget.
Yeah. Because 23, it's just telling me where the balance is now, but I
Right.
can't tell what happened during the year. If you
Sure.
pulled 7 out, you got this 7 coming in. You know, where did you start at the beginning of the year? You know, what came out for the item? You've got, I'm sure the majority of this is going into the restricted account, so where did
Yes.
you end? So that's what I'm trying to understand.
Understood. I'll put together a schedule here.
Well, you provided the same document called the restricted schedule when we had the October financials, if I'm not mistaken. If not, we can do the year end, showing how the 22 actuals actually happened.
What I can put together, Scott, is a comparison of the 22 budget versus the 22 actual, so the committee here can see the total variance in 22, the total positive variance.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm just trying
Sure.
to understand is how much that increased over.
Understood.
The interest income, the increase is that, are those dollars restricted to the project?
The restricted dollars that could serve two purposes. One, to fund project expenses, or two, pay down debt service related to the project. At this time, these dollars are earmarked to fund that project budget deficit.
So that's the issue I guess I have. There's a mix in here of both your operations and what's happening with the project.
And
So-
debt service too. Yeah.
Right, so I'm having a difficulty pulling out and seeing where your operations ended up and where the project, you know, is happening.
Sure. Understood.
So, and that's another thing too, is that in this report here, I'm not getting a report on where the project spending is at. You know, how much money, cash you have in the project, what your spending has been to date, contracts you have encumbered. And I mean, that's well over the size of your budget here for that project, and knowing where that's at and where your spending is at for that would be helpful too.
Okay.
To know if, all of the things that you did last year to make sure that there was enough funds to fund the project, it would be good to know, how are we doing with comparison to that?
Sure.
Do we have enough funds to fund the rest of the project? Where are we at with that? And so getting a financial report regarding the project would be helpful.
Understood. In the December pack that went to the board, there was a schedule that showed the drawdown to date, the expected drawdowns through the life of the project, and where the budget currently is at. We could provide that to the full board in advance of next Friday's meeting, Scott, with an update. I think, we can say we're not in any danger of having a shortfall in funds here related to project expenses.
Yeah, it's just a report to us that shows that.
Understood. Okay.
So do I understand your question to suggest that the other non-operating revenue, some of it's available to cover operating costs, some isn't?
Correct.
That's your point. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah, and that's when we came to the board in October, showing the different elements that got us to the budget gap. I think it was $4 million in excess interest income. That's where this is living right now, but you're saying you're suggesting it be stripped out because it's really not our operating, it's project related.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we kind of, at this point, when you're doing a major project like this, you need to know what's happening with the project and you need to know what's happening with your operations, and the two shouldn't be mixed with each other.
I guess I'd even be thinking, now you got me thinking about it. Okay. when you do a major project, then you wake up with the bills for what, not just necessarily the bills, the operating, I'm assuming your operating expenses are gonna go up, we're gonna see a whole bunch of things. So do we know, even, should we be looking out a little bit further ahead than just the 23 budget? I mean, I'm not asking, saying you should formally approve something, but to say, okay, well, we know these things book up longer than a year, and how do bookings look, and how do we look so that we don't wake up with a problem in 25?
And we're actually doing that planning now, as far as what the operating expense impact is gonna be. We've already looked at operating expenses related to the expansion that we expect to incur in 23. It was already in the 23 budget. And as we're thinking about 24 and beyond, we've got those same line items identified and are now working on projecting what those expenses will be. So we're prepared for that.
And how do the revenues look against it? Assuming they've got to be start coming into focus.
Of course,
soon.
yeah. And bookings are very encouraging. We'll hear more to come.
Thanks. As long as you just cut to the chase, I'm good.
Understood.
One last question
Yes,
on the Visit Milwaukee management fees. So the budget was 5.3 million and the payment was 6.7.
yeah, so the variance, the Visit Milwaukee management fee is funded primarily from prior year city hotel taxes and current year county hotel taxes. So when the similar to the tax revenue budget, when we established the Visit Milwaukee management fee budget, it was based on a very low tax revenue collection because we hadn't received 5 months worth of tax data that proved to be much stronger than we expected it to. So as those tax revenues grew, so did our obligation to Visit Milwaukee.
So this is mainly all due to just operations and how operating results ended up. This isn't any past amounts that were due to them that was additionally to be paid to them.
It does not include any sort of deferral amounts that we would owe them for prior years. This is the current obligation.
Okay.
That's right.
That's the current.
Are we caught up on all those?
Yes, yeah, we've finished that at the end of this year, 22,
Yeah.
end of 22, yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's jump to pages 7 and 8. You'll see a couple other income statements here that compare our last year's actual to this year's forecast and the forecast plan in December. If there's any questions on that, please don't hesitate to reach out. 7 and 8 provide a current snapshot of our 22 capital budget. Looking at line 45, you'll see that we're coming in under budget, and that's on page 8 by about $350K. An issue that is carried over from 21 is lead time and availability for parts, materials, and equipment. As we finalize project schedules, it's possible that we see some of these projects bleed over into 23, as we did with some projects from the prior fiscal year. My expectation is that most of that 356 that we're saving in 22 becomes applied towards projects in 23 due to timing issues. Overall, the focus of this year's capital spending has been on projects that deal with life safety, building functionality, code compliance, revenue generation, and contractual obligations. At present, the district is not concerned about meeting future capital maintenance needs. Pages 9 and 10 represent the cash projections for the next 12 months. Page 9 is the unrestricted position. The numbers you see here represent 23 budget numbers, but for the starting balance in January, it's actually higher relative to budget based on better performance in 22, which means we're expecting to end 23 with a higher cash balance. The budget's certainly good news. And page 10 represents a restricted position, which we just spoke about a couple minutes ago. Again, you've heard me say this many times, but over the past 12 months, management is very pleased with where the balance of this account is. Even after using the $7 million to fund the expansion project budget gap, we are projecting growth over the next 12 months. And as that balance grows, we'll be considering options of how to best use this reserve, including paying down existing debt, applying funds towards future capital projects, but also maintaining that critical rainy day fund. More discussion to come on that with this committee and the larger board in the coming years as we near call dates for our existing debt.
Do you know what your budget was for 2023 for the Visit Milwaukee payment?
I do have that right here, Scott. Budget for visit is 8.7.
Okay.
And that's very similar to what we had budgeted in 22 before the pandemic set in, and about $300K more than our 19 expense obligation.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Well, on the visit side, do we know were they dipping into their reserves during the pandemic? I don't, Mark, you're not here on that board.
I don't know. They dipped, yes, they went in, I think, about $1 million, $1.3 million, and are expected to go in a similar amount in '23. And still have a reserve of, I think it's $4 or $5 million after that.
Why would they need to dip in?
Question for them.
I don't know. I have it, I just don't remember it offhand.
Do you obtain their financials
Yeah.
as part of your agreement?
Yeah, their financials, and Jim, Mark, and me are on the board separate from this. I'm on their executive committee, so very involved in what they're doing.
We have from a center district standpoint, we did the contract with them last year, right? So it's a little more
We're meeting with them far
incentive
more
laden.
regularly. Yes,
Correct.
well, incentive laden, and also involved in how the budget is put together, how the budget is approved, and how the monies are spent after the budget has been approved.
Look, if we're just getting back to 19's numbers, last time I checked, hiring people costs a lot more money. So, and I seem to check that every day.
People ask for more.
Well, and then they're getting it. So it's, I can see where they'd be having to, where they,
Yeah.
if they want.
But even though they tap into the reserve, there's not a concern that that's going to be a reoccurring issue. They really seem to think this is the last need for it.
No, and at some point we should hope they start to rebuild their reserve.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, that is my financial report.
Are there any other questions for Steve at this point? Discussion? All right, with that, Marty, I think we turn it over to you for the CEO report.
Thank you. I don't plan on boring you, making you go through the details of the CEO report twice. I'm just going to go over the topics, which I'll get into at the full board meeting next week. As I do normally, I'll go over the highlights of the Miller High Life Theater, Arena, Wisconsin Center event activity for the end of '22, give an outlook of how we're performing in '23. I will say that as we wrapped up '22, we did see an uptick in November and December in the tickets sold for Monet, so that was encouraging. Our own Megan Setman, who is Vice President of Sales and will be presenting next Friday to you, had her wedding in our building on the 31st at the New Discovery. So that was a nice way to end the year in '22. Provide an update on where we are with the PTG agreement. It's really been, it's gotten off to a really good start. We're seeing the familiarity of people to the artists that are playing there is a much broader base. Attendance numbers to the events that they're bringing are higher than we had previously experienced, and I'm very encouraged with the traffic they're putting into that facility. So more to come on that.
Marty, you mentioned the Monet. How did that do compared to the Van Gogh?
Dramatically different. We have not finalized the numbers on that.
Because it ended last week.
Sunday. We didn't expect Monet to replicate what Van Gogh did. So much of the success of Van Gogh, we believe, was lightning in a bottle based upon it happening at a time where we were limited to 250 people in our building at a time. People were looking to get out because of the pandemic in July of 21, and the uniqueness of it. We will make money on the Monet exhibit, just not to the magnitude that we saw with Van Gogh. And one of the things that I since you brought that up, that has really continues to make us all very happy is the performance of our guest services staff. And we have people who are familiar with our building, but we bring in something specifically like Van Gogh and Monet, and we're expecting them to take on the role of a docent. And Sarah and her team put together some very a good script for people to go by, but aren't, this isn't Disney World, and we're not expecting them to all of a sudden become art experts. It's been very gratifying to see how immersed they get in their role in hosting these events, and the information and support they're able to proactively provide people to add to think we will continue to look to do those when the opportunity presents itself, and the space is available. For the Monet exhibit, we had Hall D available for an extended period of time because we had to make it smaller for the expansion. It was a great use of activity to get big people in the building. Another example of amazing numbers is we had a little old event called Brickfest in the building this past weekend.
Sure you are.
I did, and I spent some money there without any kind of discount. It was retail. That event brought in 9,500 people over the course of 2 days into one hall. And then going on simultaneously, to the left of that was an RV show that had great numbers, and to the right of it was Monet. So on a otherwise would have been a quiet weekend, we had 3 separate events going on the exhibition level of our building. So very encouraging activity in our building.
Volleyball this weekend?
The volleyball's this weekend, yeah. Loading in now and start playing Saturday morning. We love that. After a latter part of the board meeting on Friday is the long-awaited presentation that Leslie Johnson from Milwaukee and Megan Setman from our place will be giving to the board. We had planned on doing this in October, just didn't have the data that we were looking for to present to the board. So they will be giving a fairly comprehensive, thorough state of the meeting and convention business, giving you an overview of what it's looking at nationally, but then specifically funneling it down to what it means to us, both short and long term. And I don't want to prejudice you, but I think it's information that will help you feel more comfortable with the numbers that we're representing, the amount of activity we think the building is going to be doing in 23, 24, well beyond the opening. We've got a couple of new programs. Again, I'll go into them in more detail next week, but we have a very interesting and unique marketing campaign tied around awareness of the rooftop ballroom. The program itself is tied to a gala giveaway. More to come on that next week. Something that Nyla Tuxon, who I've mentioned a number of times, our Vice President of HR, who joined us in June, has just, she really dove into our employee benefits plan, not just medical, dental, and wellness, but was able to find an employee assistance program that had very minimal cost, something that we previously had not been able to offer. The city has a program, but they self-administer. It's not something we were able to do, and it's a program that we rolled out first of this year, in December, and it's really been received very well by the employees. All full and part-time employees are able to participate in this, and if you care to know more about it, I'm happy to share with you, but that's something I'll just mention next week. One of the things that I also will just talk a little bit about, and it's really just more of a touch base with you all. 2 months ago, thereabouts, Jim and I had a really good meeting with Peter Fagan and Joel Plant, Mike Ballat with the Bucks about what they're doing and what they're thinking about doing in the Deer District and how we need to work together closer. And that in and of itself was a productive meeting, and where that has gone is that I am meeting regularly with Mike Ballat and Peter Fagan and their security team to make sure that we are working together, and not just on how do we get business, but we participated in a meeting 2 weeks ago with the Bucks, the city police, city fire, mayor's office, just to talk about what we collectively can be doing to provide more information to attendees to the Deer District and our properties. And I just want to share with you ongoing discussions with the Bucks have never been healthier and more regular, which is really what we were driving for. So that's really happy about that. Talking about security, a group of us first week in February are heading east to spend a day at the Boston Convention Center. They're probably the leading convention center when it comes to implementing security. They were the first convention center to receive Safety Act certification from the Department of Homeland Security. It's something that we aspire to go for. No one's pushing us for it. Many of you may know that NFL stadiums really need to be Safety Act certified. It's a requirement by the NFL. International Association of Venue Managers has not taken an aggressive position on what the standards should be for safety at convention centers, although we've reached out to them and asked for their involvement as we round out the plans for the expansion and the South modernization. The discussion about magnetometers and safety of attendees and packages and deliveries is something we're really looking at, and we've set up a day trip to meet with a group who's been very open and responsive to helping us understand what they've done, the challenges they've had, and figure out in the planning stage what we can do in the new facility. At the end of the board meeting next week, we'll also have a representative from ICON giving you an update on where we are with the expansion. One of the things that you may not look at regularly, I look at often, more than once daily, is I check out the view of the south and west facing webcams. Over the past several weeks, we've gotten to the point of the project growth that we're unable to see what's happening on the upper side of the expansion. So yesterday, both cameras were raised, so we now have we can now see the entire footprint and what's going on. And 2/3 of the floor of the Hall E have been poured. It's going, if you've been by it with any regularity, it's amazing how quickly it's rising. And I think the anticipated topping off ceremony, although not scheduled yet, is expected to be sometime in June. So things are really on schedule, and thus far, we've not seen, I'd say thus far, in the past 4 to 6 months, we have had no issues with supply chain as far as getting materials or any type of issues that have impacted the ability to continue the project moving forward, to be done on time and in the within the revised budget. So we're feeling very optimistic about it. And to your point, Scott, we can get you, and remiss that we didn't have it for you today up in the committee about financials for the expansion, but Steve, Brian Rakowski, and I meet every Monday with the ICON team and go over the budget and go over all the elements. So while we don't have it in front of us, we have the information you're looking for readily available, and we'll share it.
Marty, do you know how long Bell Phillips is going to be closed off?
It's going to be closed off a bit long, I think at least another 4 to 6 months, because the next major piece of LR is not only they're doing now the furthest east portion of the building, we need the space for the cranes, but also the Sky Bridge is going to be going back up. It won't be opening until we finish the expansion, but we need to close it to construct it and then lift it back to the Hyatt. I have the timeline. Brian, do you remember?
They're expected to reopen by July 1st.
Okay, so 6, 7 months. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions from Marty or updates needed? Very good. Next couple things are just housekeeping. The board meeting agenda for Friday. It is in your packet on page 11. Very similar to what we went through. And we will also have a little bit more of an update from Mike from CAA ICON as far as the expansion goes. Marty's report may be similar, but a little more in depth. And then we also have our annual personnel discussion, which has to do with compensation related activities. And we'll have that discussion also in our governance committee meeting today. And then we will, as Marty said, the update for visits. So we have a pretty full agenda of items to go through, as we've kind of added a few things in that were moved, I guess, from the October meeting. With that said, I will not be available to be there next Friday, so Grady will be running the meeting. I'll be out of town. The next, are there any questions on the agenda? Great. Then the other thing is just the meeting dates. Please make sure they're marked in your calendar, including me, right, Michael? So they're all there. Obviously, a scaled down version of what we have from previous years, just because we had so many things going on with the potential expansion over the last couple of years and the expansion as we've gone through it. So I think we're in a good cadence We do, as we've talked about, we reserve the right to add a meeting as needed or as necessary, but these are the ones that are concrete and really kind of pivot around certain key milestones such as our audits and our budget reviews and things like that.
The only thing I'd like to add,
Yeah,
Mr.
please.
Chairman, is if you would like, we're quite limited and restricted where we can go as far as seeing the expansion because of the work that's being done. We're really no longer going on the property itself, but if you're interested in seeing it, happy to get you closer than you would otherwise get with appropriate PPE. So just let us know.
Okay. With that said, I think we are going to entertain a motion to adjourn, unless there's any other questions.
Motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye. All right, thanks very much. And have a great rest of the weekend. Actor-less weekend. All right, Michael, can we get a roll call?
Mr. Grady Crosby,
Here.
Representative Keelan Haywood,
Here.
Senator LaTanya Johnson, Mr. James Kim.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thanks. First order of business is any discussion and the approval of the meeting minutes from our governance meeting in October of 2022. Is there any discussion on those meeting minutes? If not, I will seek a motion to approve.
I'll move it. I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Approved. The next order of business, Steve Marsh for our financial report and update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Today's update will be our last review of 2022 financial activity until Baker Tilly's presentation of the audited financial statements at the May board meeting. Overall, today's financial news regarding 2022 is positive and not materially different from the update that was provided to the board in December. Before we get into the numbers, a couple quick updates. Number one, regarding 2023, you'll notice there are no financial exhibits for that fiscal year in your packet today. At this time, we continue to forecast the budget the board adopted in October, and we'll provide a more comprehensive forecast on 23 at the March board meeting. Number two, Baker Tilly conducted their preliminary audit field work in December. The district's finance team will be spending the better part of the next 45 days preparing for their primary field work, which is scheduled to occur in March. And number three, we'll be asking the board next Friday to adopt a resolution that allows management to formally transfer funds from the capital maintenance account held in trust at U.S. Bank to the district's operating account to fund 2023 budget capital expenditures. The board is asked to and subsequently adopts this resolution each and every year, a pretty routine matter. So let's get into the 22 review, and we'll start with the income statement first, which is page 5 of your packet. And we'll get right to the point. You can see on line 66, column G, we exceeded budgeted net income before depreciation and expansion debt by $10.7 million. The largest contributing factor to this positive variance is tax revenues, line 34. You can see we exceeded budget in this category by about $8.1 million. Marty used the sandbag budget number. I think it's important to bring context to how it was established, or perhaps more importantly, when it was established, which was late September of 2021. At that time, the district had received tax revenues through July of that year. Those collections were trailing our 21 budget numbers, and assuming the rest of 21 actualized in a similar way, we projected only modest year-over-year growth in the 22 budget. But we now know that the rest of 21 did not actualize in a similar way. In fact, for the months of August through December of 21, total tax collections by the district exceeded 2019 numbers during that same time period. And as you're all well aware, that recovery continued and even accelerated in 22, blowing well past our budget. The numbers in the income statement today for taxes are actual through October, with modest estimates in place for November and December, so it is possible that we could see this number grow further. However, as is, the 22 numbers are ahead of the 2019 pre-pandemic totals by almost 6%, which is almost 2 years ahead of schedule of what HVS projected when we issued debt in 2020 for the expansion project. So what does this mean for the district? Does it mean we're flush with cash? Well, not exactly, but it does mean we can replenish the restricted reserve account more quickly than we had previously projected for the $7 million we took to help fund the project budget gap. It means we offset some of the expected negative cash flow on the operations side as we paid down this year the 2020 payment deferral to Visit Milwaukee. And it means the district will likely be making its second pilot payment to the city in 2023. Overall, it means the district fund balances are stronger than we expected them to be at the end of 22, and that should give the board some comfort, particularly as we enter 2023, where the macroeconomic outlook remains a bit uncertain. Certainly a good news story for 22, and we hope that continues into 23. A couple other highlights for 22: net operating income line 28, column G, exceeded budget by about $500K, or 36%. Lines 1 through 5 and 7 through 9 are the major event revenue categories. You'll notice some variation in these line items between budget and forecast. Overall revenue came in as expected, however, not in the buckets we had originally budgeted for. I do want to point out line 13, other income, which is substantially higher than budget. As I've mentioned in prior committee meetings, this is where we booked the supplemental grant awarded to the district via the Shutter Venue Operators Grant Program, which was unbudgeted. Also driving the positive variance in this category is better than expected fees refunded to the district by the State Department of Revenue for its tax collection services, as well as some canceled event revenue from late 21 and early 22. On the operating expense side, you'll notice several categories that exceeded initial budget estimates. The labor market remained tight throughout most of 22. This created budget pressures on both contract services, line 17, and wages, line 15, as the district contracted more third-party labor to backfill positions we normally fill in-house, and paid out more in overtime to cover open positions we were attempting to fill. And utilities, line 18, is up 16% as the district has dealt with rising energy costs, like most others. Scrolling down to line 35, interest income, you can see we're projecting to exceed budget by just under $3 million for 22. If you recall, this income is earned principally off of bond proceeds for the expansion and is a key component of the plan presented to the board in September to fund the project budget gap. I expect this number will continue to grow in 23 based on the current rate environment and the expected cash drawdown schedule for the project. As for non-operating expenses, the district is holding the line here. You'll notice some positive variances in line 41 salaries, 43 unemployment compensation, 44 health and dental insurance, 47 advertising, and 50 legal services. The two outliers here, of course, are the Visit Milwaukee management fee, line 49, and the City of Milwaukee pilot payment, line 63. While both substantially exceeded budget estimates, they are also a reflection of the district's financial success in late 21 and fiscal year 22. One other note on the income statement, line 67, bond interest expense is greater than budget. This is due to the debt transaction the district closed in late September to cover the expansion project shortfall. As it pertains to debt, we've executed at least one bond transaction each of the last 3 years, 2021 and 22. I don't expect the district will be playing too much in the debt markets in 23, but should opportunities present themselves, we'll certainly make this committee aware of them. Any questions on the income statement?
Senator Johnson is joining.
Yes, you.
Hello. No worries.
Page.
Are there any questions for Steve? All right, go ahead.
Okay, we'll move on to pages 7 and 8. Excuse me, pages 8 and 9, which is our capital budget for 22. And looking at line 45 on page 9, you'll see we're coming in under budget by approximately $350,000. An issue that is carried over from 21 is lead time and availability for parts, materials, and equipment. As we finalize project schedules, it is possible that we see some of these projects bleed over into 23 as we did with some projects from the prior fiscal year. My expectation is that most of this $356,000 we're saving in 22 is applied towards projects in 23 due to timing issues. Overall, the focus of this year's capital spending has been on projects that deal with life safety, building functionality, code compliance, revenue generation, and contractual obligations. At present, the district is not concerned about meeting future capital maintenance needs. Pages 10 and 11 represent.
Hey, Steve, before you go there,
Yes, sir.
just a real general question. It just stood out to me that in the capital budget, there was allocations for ice machines and coffee urns.
Yes.
Is that typically something that, so in my mind, that typically wouldn't go in a capital budget. I don't think of things you can take away from a building to be in a capital.
Oh, you're thinking of more things that are affixed
Right.
to walls. Yeah.
Is that just the way we look at capital expenses?
Yeah, so the policy of the district, and we've talked about this with Baker Tilly now, every year when we review this capital policy, the threshold is somewhat low for us. Really, any purchase we make, furniture, fixture, equipment, that is greater than, I think the threshold is only $500 right now, and also has a useful life of greater than two years, is considered a capital expenditure, or up for discussion, depending on the nature of the spend.
Yeah, because that's the only other thing that stood out in my mind was the cost of these items. They were pretty costly items, and it's like, well, maybe there is a reason, because both of them came in around 30,000.
Yeah, the coffee urns. Well, that was a pretty large order, and
We bought 300 coffee urns for the banquet tables.
Yeah, I got it, but Steve explained it, this is the, kind of rules of engagement,
That's
how we
right.
look at capital expenditures.
Thanks.
Any other questions on the capital summary? Pages 10 and 11 represent our cash positions for the next 12 months. Page 10 is our unrestricted position. The numbers you see here represent 23 budget numbers before the starting balance in January. That's actually higher relative to budget based on better performance in 22, which means we're expecting to end 23 with a higher cash balance in budget. Certainly good news there. And page 11 represents the restricted position. You've heard me say this many times over the past 12 months. Management is very pleased with the balance of this account. Even after using $7 million to fund the expansion project budget gap, we are projecting growth over the next 12 months. And as this balance grows, we'll be considering options of how best to use this reserve, including paying down existing debt, applying funds towards future capital projects, but also maintaining that critical rainy day fund. More discussion on that to come with the full board of this committee in the coming years as we near call dates on some of our existing debt. Mr. Chairman, as I said at the beginning of the presentation here, the news regarding 22 was fairly positive, and management is set to build on that success into 23. That concludes my report.
Are there any additional questions for Steve on the financial update report? Okay, great. If not, we will turn over to Marty and we will have the CEO update.
Thank you. One of the things that I'd just like to state before I get into it is Steve mentioned that interest income is overperforming by $3 million. And that we had identified and gotten the board approval to allocate $4 million of interest income towards the bridging the gap. So that's $3 million of the $4 million that we need to bridge the gap, anticipating that there'll be at least another $1 million, if not more, that we'll realize in 23.
That's right.
To do that. So yes, we've taken that variance and already applied it to the project. As we closed out 22, Steve said we'll probably let someone look at these numbers until the audit in May. Hopefully you're getting to know us well enough to know that as there's good news, we like to beat it to death. So I'm sure we'll be talking about 22 sometime at the March meeting as well, just because I think another good year in comparison to budget. The Monet exhibit that opened up in October closed last Sunday. The attendance was good, not to the extent that the Van Gogh attendance was. We didn't expect it to be the same. So the performance is about what we had expected. Always would have liked more, but I think the biggest driver of why they're so different was the quality of the exhibits were on par. They were both tremendous, but we have to remember that the Van Gogh exhibit came here in 21 when there was a 250-person cap on who could come into our building at one time. People had been inside for a year plus, so the ability to get out of the house and do something with a group but still feel safe was a first for many. And the engagement was 6.5 months as opposed to Monet's 3-month run. So, but we ended 22 with a really strong. 23 is very optimistic with how it's being booked. You'll hear more about that at the board meeting next week. What was originally scheduled to occur in October, you may remember we delayed because of just expecting the budget to need more time. Visit Milwaukee, Megan Setman of our organization will be presenting to you all next Friday a State of the Union report on where the meeting and convention business is industry-wide, and then as it really relates to Milwaukee, both short-term and then long-term, 2 to 3 years and beyond out. So we've seen a preview of it already. It's very informative and very encouraging of what the next couple of years are going to be business-wise. So I hope you'll find it useful information as well. As part of the full report next week, I'll give an update on the Miller High Life Theater activity, arena activity, Wisconsin Center activity. One of the things that I'll go a little bit more in detail, but I just would like to mention it, that not quite a year into our new deal with PTG operating the Miller High Life Theater for public ticketed events, we're really seeing an uptick in the amount of events that are coming into the facility and also the attendance numbers. The acts that they're bringing in have a larger fan base, so the number of people attending their events is a little higher than we were experiencing It's really helping us get the name of the facility out there, people into the building, and we're seeing the increased activity without really spending any dedicated manpower that we have, staying focused on meetings, conventions, and the operation of the arena itself. So more to come on that, but thus far, we're seeing really nice progress, and PTG's doing really good job for us. Two things that I'll go a little bit more detail next week, both I think pretty exciting things. Sarah has been spearheading a marketing project that we'll be launching next week for a gala giveaway earmarked and targeted towards 501c3 organizations, a giveaway gala for 2024 in the new rooftop ballroom, using that as a way to drive awareness and attention. So I'll be able to share that with you next week. One of the programs that Nyla Tuckson, I've mentioned her a number of times. Nyla joined us in June as a Vice President of Human Resources. She was able to find and do a fair amount of research on an employee assistance program, something that we had not otherwise had in our organization, for a very nominal annual fee that's available to all full part-time families, all full and part-time employees and their families at no cost to them. It's been very well received, and the good news is we've offered a program. Also, the good news is that we've had a number of employees who needed that assistance, and with it have been able to get support they otherwise might not have gotten to. So it's just a great story. It really is a great example of be bold, be proud, be experience obsessed, and our drive and striving to be an employer of choice. Just really happy about and being able to offer to all employees is so much of what we're trying to do. That those part-time staff, although they may not be full-time in the number of hours they put into our organization, these people are frontline staff, and we need to recruit them, train them, retain them, and offering these types of benefits is really helping us retain employees who we need to execute all of these events. Just a little update on, this is an FYI, and it's a good one as well. Jim and I met late in the year last year with Peter Fagan from the Bucks, Joel Plant from Live Nation, Frank Productions, Mike Balot, who's in charge of business development for the Bucks, because we had expressed concerns, and not opposition, but just expressed concerns about how the Bradley Center lot was being used, specifically if the Live Nation venue was going to be placed there. The Bucks made representations back in 2015 of how that property was going to be developed, and it really was a very attractive plan and really supported the district in bringing properties or components of that development that could really support an expansion. 2015, we hadn't got the go-ahead to do the project yet, but certainly well on track to have that done. And so we were able to get some time with that group. They gave us an update on where they are with the development beyond the Live Nation venue, share with us the trials, tribulations, and opportunities that they were pursuing. And one of the longer-term benefits of that meeting, and something that we expressed as to why we were not jumping aboard and saying this is the best project ever, is that we did feel that the district was not being provided with enough information proactively on what they were doing so that we could be supportive of it. And this has really opened up a much more regular line of communication between our organization and the Bucks, not just in how the property is being developed potentially, but also operationally from an ongoing collaboration on security outside of there. We don't want to run the security of the buildings, but we want to make sure that our security and their security are working in a good mesh along with the city. So those conversations have gone really well. Meetings have gone well. There was a meeting 2 weeks ago with the Bucks organization, myself, police department, fire department, mayor's office, just talking about how all of these stakeholders, what can we be doing collectively? And this was not a money discussion. It was an information discussion. Using the existing resources, what can we do better and more to make sure that we're getting the word to attendees who are coming downtown to be safe? And that dealt with burglaries, robberies, vehicular robberies. That's really the concern. So all of this is really positive that we're working in a very collaborative sense with people for whatever reason, we hadn't been up until the past couple of months. It's just a good thing. Some of us talking about security, a number of us are going on February 7th. We're taking a day trip to Boston. I think one of the leading, if not the leading convention center for safety is the Boston Convention Center, Massachusetts Convention Center Authority is what they have two buildings, the Boston Convention Center and the Heinz Convention Center. They were the first convention center to be Safety Act certified by the Department of Homeland Security. And as we look to develop our security plan for the expansion and the South Building, we just feel a field trip is really going to be very helpful in having us learn best practices, find out what they're doing that works, what they've done that hasn't worked, so that we can, when we open, be poised to be on the cutting edge, leading edge of venue security. So just FYI on that. Mike Abrams from ICON will not be in town next week, but one of his colleagues, very able-bodied, Dane Jensen, will give an update on where we are with the expansion project. For those of you who may check our website, buildingmore.com, we have two webcams, one facing south, one facing west, that through the advancement of the expansion were pointed in an area that we were no longer able to see the top work of the expansion because it's out of the ground so high. So yesterday we had both cameras repositioned so that we now get the full top-down view of the expansion site. So if you haven't taken a look at it, please do so. It's mind-boggling to me what has happened in the past 6-8 months. And if at another date you're interested in getting closer to the expansion, let us know. I'd love to schedule some time with you or you and a group to walk you into areas that we can. We've limited the walk-arounds a bit now because the construction is really at a fever pitch. We have 5 cranes operating simultaneously, so we're not able to get to a lot of places, but we can certainly get out and walk onto the floor of the expansion exhibition hall. I'd love to take you there. And as far as that, again, just hopefully you're able to stay around for the visit and a WCD presentation on the state of the meeting and convention industry. Again, I think it's important information for you to know that it supports both the districts and visits excitement and optimism that not only leading up to the expansion completion of the RNC, that the meeting and convention business and our position in it, we're really poised at the right time. And looking back to March, April of 20, when we came to the board, and Tanya and Jim were a part of that, and at the height of COVID, asked for approval on something to support an industry that had literally shut down. You all were so smart to support us because we're going to be opening at a time to really strike hot. That's it for me.
Mark
Feel
those
super
words.
smart now.
Yeah, boy, that's compliments all over the place.
Well, the next part is compensation.
Yeah,
So,
wow.
I know too.
Who's also on the agenda?
We saw right through it.
I would hope you did.
The meeting agenda for next week, I think, has been set. The one discussion go ahead, Grady.
I just had a quick question. In Mario, the meeting with Live Nation, I was just wondering, will we receive revenue from ticket sales at Live Nation?
No, the facility fee that we see for the Bucks and from the Pfizer Forum is, we looked through all aspects of the
To figure out how to make that.
agreement to see if there was any opportunity for us. And it's we worked with, obviously, Michael Best went through the agreement as well. It's very specific that the only revenue we're entitled to is the facility fee for the events within the Pfizer Forum. You know, I think the group that put together the arena lease agreement did a really good job. I mean, it's easy to look back and go, well, they should have. That's a very strong agreement on our side. I mean, there's some things, looking back, it'd be great to have changed, but we're not entitled to anything. I wish we were. I was hoping we could have found something that got us some revenue, but there isn't.
How long is that deal?
26 years remaining, 27 years remaining.
Gotcha.
Not that I look at it regularly, could tell you very much about it.
Right, yeah. Interesting though. So yeah, definitely good to start having a collaborative type relationship with them. The only other question I had was with regard to the expansion project itself. You're talking about ICON, it's going to update. somewhere along the way, I heard some information about Gilbane and how they've gotten into an issue in Massachusetts around failing to have enough women and minority-owned business participation on one of their large projects, and they had to pay the state of Massachusetts a north of $1 million fine, and it all had to do with them projecting more women and minority contractor participation than actually happened. And because of that, the state of Massachusetts has put something like an auditor over them to, really make sure these numbers are what they are. Just wondering if that ever surfaced or came up or any concern with our project here with regard to any issues with the integrity of our numbers for minority and women participation.
I am not, this is the first I'm hearing of the situation in Boston. We do have Cross and Prism serving as third-party auditors and monitors of all of the information they're providing us. We are in a very good place in, I think it's 3 of the 4 buckets as far as at the very least achieving the minimum requirements. We're meeting with Nikon and Gilbane, I believe, tomorrow. We're having regular meetings with them, holding them accountable, because going back 3-4 months ago, it was before the project. Right now we're averaging 260 thereabout people on site a day, which is up probably 400 or 500% from where it was 6 months ago. So a lot more resources, a lot more manpower, a lot more organizations on site working. But we were not concerned, but weren't happy that we were falling short in one of the buckets. And they're focusing a lot of their energy on bringing that up to the minimum requirements. They've made really good progress in the past 3-4 months. We fully expect them to achieve, if not surpass, the goals that they need to by 2024.
Well, let me shoot to you the information that I was looking at. So
Please.
At any extent from a PR standpoint,
Yeah.
you've kind of checked the box that, we were aware, we, had additional assurances from Gilbane that's not going to be the case on our project, and we have the necessary safeguards in place.
Yeah.
To make sure.
I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, I assure you, I'm glad. I'm sorry to hear it. I'm glad we didn't need to hear something like that to be proactive on our side 3-4 months ago when we saw, hey, we're not there yet, and we were given the response, well, it's early in the project yet. Those buckets haven't really started getting filled yet, and that's all well and good. But we wanted to be proactive, because to address it, we can't be addressing it a year from now.
Right.
We've got 6 months to go on the project.
Right.
We need to. So
I'll shoot it to you.
Please
so I can
do.
get back to the office.
When did that information, when was that released? I didn't hear anything about
This
it
was a matter of a few weeks ago.
Okay,
As
I
far as I
didn't hear anything. Okay.
recall.
yeah, please, thank you.
All right, I'll do it.
All right, great. Any other questions? The meeting, just so we know, the meeting agenda for next week is roughly the same with what Marty went through. We'll have some updates. We will also have the personnel discussion with the full board, which we'll have in a minute. We're going to try to move the meeting time to 8 a.m.
Lord have mercy.
just for Latanya. We requested that.
Would you like us to get you a room reserved in the WCD suite at the Hilton? Would that make it easier for you?
It might.
Just a combination of schedules at this point is just a little bit tough with a lot going on for a lot of folks, including myself. So if you could be here at 8, we can get through the personnel discussion, all the voting that we need to go, and then I will probably need to leave a little early. But just as an FYI to everybody, we can get through the other presentations from visit and whatnot with the updates that we're going to have. So I think it's going to be a full agenda. But if we can start a little earlier, hopefully that will ease some of the pressure and stress on everybody, except for Latanya. Thank you. All right. With that, I'm wording right here. The committee may convene in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute S19.851C to consider the employment, compensation, or performance evaluation of certain WCD employees for which the WCD board has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Committee is expected to reconvene in open session following this agenda item. Do we have a motion to go to closed session?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we will wait for a moment to clear the room, and then we'll go into closed session. please they're in your packet. Please make sure you have those listed, and Michael has sent, I think also has sent that out to everybody as well
I'm
for on
going
the
to
calendars.
send out an update after this meeting.
Great, and then we have the 8 o'clock start next week. Thank you. Any other items for discussion? Bring them up now. If not, we will entertain those offline as well. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Cool.